So I was actually one of the members who was on the House floor when this occurred. Obviously, the House floor was not filled with members and senators because of COVID restrictions and social distancing. I would say there were probably 120 to 150 members on the floor out of the total, which should have been 535 in a joint session. But we were about 1 hour into the debate on the counting of the Arizona electors. And when the first thing that happened was, I noticed that the Capitol Police came in and escorted leadership off the floor. So Mr. Hoyer, Speaker Pelosi, Mr. Scalise, and normally when that happens, you have an idea that there's some security issue going on. We knew that there was a protest in town. We were told a few minutes later that some of the protesters had breached the Capitol building. They'd entered the Capitol building unauthorized. And we went into a recess briefly. A few minutes after that, we were told that tear gas had been used in the rotunda, which of course is right down the hall from the House chamber, and to prepare ourselves to use our gas hoods if necessary. And a few minutes after that, we heard knocking on the House door, thumping on the House door, and the Capitol Police at that time just evacuated all the members. And all the members who were left on the floor just had to go back to the House office buildings, where, of course, it was much quieter, much safer.
So were you there when people started to actually take over the chamber?
I was there when the thumping occurred on the door. Anyone who's been in a State of the Union address knows what that thumping sounds like when they announce the senators coming in, or the Supreme Court, or the president. That's exactly what it sounded like, people just thumping on the door. The Capitol Police did a great job of securing the chamber, of keeping everyone out, of those protesters out, until they evacuated the chamber of all the House members.
What was going through your mind when this was all going on?
Well, the Capitol Police does such a great job that I never felt insecure. A lot of people, I was in the military, I'm a veteran, tear gas doesn't frighten me. I mean, obviously later we heard that, there was a gunshot. But other than that, there was no indication that this was a truly violent protest, as violent as one that you'd worry about. But again, this should never have occurred in the U.S. Capitol. I'll never support a protester breaking a window to break in the Capitol, or disobeying, a lawful command of a Capitol Police officer not to enter the building. So it definitely got out of hand, no question about it. It shouldn't happen like that. But again, people are very discouraged. They're disappointed. The country is polarized. People have watched riots over the summer that for valid reasons, but they've turned violent with no repercussion. And I think the message has gotten out to Americans, I'm sad to say, that violent protests are somehow acceptable in America. They're never acceptable. I would never urge someone to protest violently. I would urge them to protest peacefully. That's your right as an American, but never to protest violently.
So it's not violent, but people did storm the Capitol like they have never done in, hundreds of 100, 200 years. I mean, there's nothing right about that. I mean, you're not supporting that, but
no, not at all. People have the right to the Capitol grounds. We have protesters every day on the Capitol grounds. But when you break a window to break into the Capitol, and you disobey a police order to stay out of the Capitol, you have crossed the line that you should never cross.
So you were then taken back to your House office building. You were in Rayburn, I take it?
That's right. And they're Capitol Police all along the way. They're securing the route. They just did a great job. I've heard some criticism today of the Capitol Police, but to be honest with you, this was a very, very large crowd. The Capitol Police, I think, did a great job at protecting the members and making sure that this didn't escalate, as far as it could have escalated. And that's all we can ask from our law enforcement in a situation like this. So I have to commend them. I think they did a great job.
Why were they not better prepared for this? I mean, we have known for some time that there were going to be a lot of people in D.C. today for this, and this could have happened. We've seen large police responses throughout the summer for other protests and other big events in town. Why not today?
Well, the Capitol Police was out in full force. I mean, I've asked some police officers. This was the same staffing they have for a State of the Union address. But they do depend upon D.C. police, and if necessary, the mayor asking for the D.C. National Guard to get called up. The mayor did not ask for that. We did not see a large DC police presence on the Capitol grounds. So the Capitol Police did everything they could, but at some point they have to depend on outside help. I mean, when you're faced with, I don't know what the numbers were of protesters today, but tens of thousands of protesters, you need a lot of police presence if what you're going to do is actually prevent entry into the building. Now, again, I think they prevented the violence from escalating a lot. Obviously, no one should have entered the building. But again, knock on wood, it seems like the injuries were kept to a minimum.
Congressman Andy Harris, talk to me about the president's response to this today. He spoke to the group on the Ellipse just outside the Capitol earlier today, across from the White House. Talk to me about that. Do you think his words of condemnation have been strong enough, or should they be stronger?
Look, I think he made it very clear that people should leave peacefully. I mean, I think he made it clear that they should always respect the law enforcement officers' orders. They should leave peacefully. I think that's probably the best he could have done. I'm glad he delivered it on a Twitter address because that's what his followers watch. So I think he did what needed to be done. I honestly think what was missing from all of this is the recognition that, again, just like we saw in the summer when a group of individuals felt that, police may have overstepped their bounds on a racial basis, we all got together and said, okay, let's look into this. Let's see what we can do about this. What's lacking in this case is when the president called for an investigation into an election that has a lot of irregularities. Again, he called for this. He's been calling for this for 2 months now. He's not been joined by people on the left and by former Vice President Biden, who I think 2 months ago should have said, you know what, let's look into all these allegations because none of them are going to turn out to be true. Let's look into them. I think people feel that there's been no transparency. And if there's one thing Americans demand of public officials, it's transparency. So I think that if we want to defuse this as soon as possible, what President Trump and former Vice President Biden should do is get together and say, you know what, let's appoint a blue ribbon commission tonight. Let's have them start looking into all the allegations over the next 10 days so that on January 20th, every American agrees there needs to be it was a free and fair election and the transition of power should occur. But short of that, I'm not sure that we're going to get out of this without some people still feeling that they've been wronged.
But clearly that's not going to happen at this point either.
Well, it could. I mean, this is what Senator Cruz has called for, a commission. But I think it should be even a higher level commission than he's called for. I think it should be at the highest levels to address the concerns of Americans have in the election. I think these things can be done very rapidly. I think we could answer most of the questions that are unanswered in 4 or 5 days of investigation. And I'm afraid that barring that kind of investigation, that we're going to have people who feel aggrieved. I mean, 74 million people voted for President Trump. We know that about 2/3 of those people feel that there were election irregularities that have not been addressed properly.
There's a lot of Democrats out there, some Republicans out there calling this an insurrection and a coup. Do you see it that way?
No, this is, no more than the BLM movement was a coup earlier when they, earlier in the summer when they ringed the White House. I think that's pretty strong language. These were demonstrators who I feel have felt the transparency has not been present. And I think transparency and investigation will go a long way toward addressing their concerns. That's the appropriate thing to do. Again, I agree with you. It's probably not going to be done, but I think that's what it would take. And we should be looking for solutions right now, how to unify the country. And if we know that there are 50 million Americans out there who feel that an election has been done, that it was not a just election, we should address those concerns as quickly as possible.
One final question for you. Do you plan to go back to the House floor to finish the Electoral College process today?
Well, we're hearing that there is a move to continue the process tonight. I'm just, from a practical point of view, I mean, you've seen pictures of what the House chamber looks like. It needs to be cleaned up. There is, I don't know because we don't have details on the shooting. We don't know where it occurred, but obviously if it occurred there needs to be an investigation. I'm not sure that realistically it could be resumed tonight. If it can, that's great. I'm here. We're going to continue the debate. We were 1 hour into a very, very interesting debate about Arizona and the constitutionality of what was done there. I think the debate should be done at some point. If it's done tonight, I'll be there tonight. If it's done tomorrow, I'll be there tomorrow.